Hello and welcome everyone to another tutorial on Shadow Productions. In this video, I'll be showing you how to get motion capture animation using your HTC Vive using Brekel OpenVr Recorder and Autodesk Maya. If you haven't seen my last video, I kind of went over the overview of Brekel OpenVr and how to do a motion capture within that software and how to export your files into FBX format. If you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. So this is pretty basic. Make sure you have your HIK menu open because we're going to be using that. So first, I'm going to be using the recording that I did for my previous video. I exported that into a FBX format. So make sure I change my Maya scene to FBX, and it's my project file, and this is the Brekel file that exported with it. The name will depend on how you name the file within Brekel. If you choose a different format name, you can have you can have a custom name on it, or you can just leave it blank and it'll just put a date stamp on it. So it's going to import take 1. There's no other takes in here. I don't believe Brekel can have multiple takes within a file. And then go down into extras, make sure it fills timeline is on so it can completely fill your timeline with your entire animation. Depending on how long it is, you may not know exactly where it is. So click import, and there we go. Change the viewport so you can see it better. And you can see my trackers in the viewport. So this is basically starting where when I clicked record in Brekel OpenVr when I was doing my walkthrough. So all of my trackers are kind of on the ground, depending on the ground plane within Brekel. So the ground plane in Brekel may be different from Maya, as you can tell, as you can see here. So basically, everything is in here. The 2 lighthouses, the trackers, the headset, and the controllers. Everything is here. And then you have a good little reference here within your outliner of each trackers. As you can see, as I clicked on each mesh, there's no keyframe animation listed here. That is because the keyframe animation is actually listed on the node within the outliner, not the actual mesh. So that's something to be mindful of. So basically the headset, the controllers, the trackers, and the lighthouses. So for the motion capture, we don't need the lighthouses, so you can delete those 2 nodes. And basically we're just going to, well, let me set the play speed to real time, make sure. And I'm gonna just click play, and you can kind of see the animation from my previous video. It's basically me walking around trying to get everything set up. Just kind of screw up the timeline until I get everything put up. There I am. So let's find my, and basically, and there's the animation. Everything looks pretty clean for the most part. Once we hook it up to the skeleton, you will notice some popping here and there, but that's easily cleanable. As you can see that the ground plane is below Maya's plane, so you may want to raise it up. So as you can see here, as I'm in my T-pose. So you select the reference node, never move any of these controllers. So if you need to move the character around or your trackers around, always use the reference node that doesn't have a keyframe. So I'm just trim the timeline. I'm gonna just kind of raise it off the ground to put it above the Maya's ground plane. And starting from there, this is basically my animation. So to get this on your character is pretty easy for the most part. It's a little bit of a workaround that you have to do. So basically go back to the T-pose. So usually what people would try to do is they would try to import their character that they want to put the animation on and try to connect the valve controllers to that character and start animating, and then they get weird, nasty results. So basically what you need to do is that you need to put this on the skeleton that's proportional to the controllers. Because again, this is not basic skeleton animation, so it doesn't adhere to the same principles as the Human IK rig, and where you can just transfer animations to different characters no matter the height. So the first thing you need to do, if you don't already have one, is create a skeleton that's basically to the proportions of your trackers in your T-pose. A good practice to do is to import a still image of yourself in this T-pose and create a skeleton to your proportions, your arm width, your height. So basically you have a good representation of how you were actually holding the controllers, and basically just your body proportions, if that makes any sense. So I already created one when I first started all of this. So change the Maya scenes and import my skeleton template. Put this back to 3015. And you see I have my skeleton here. It's already been defined. Basically I just use Maya's skeleton template and just create a skeleton that's already came defined, and all you have to do is just add controllers to it. Let's create a controller. I really don't like those circles controllers in the way. So the next thing you see is that your Vive trackers are not lined up to your character. Another thing people will usually like to do is try to move the character to line it up with the tracker. That's not really a good idea because the definitions and everything, it's best to just leave the character where it is by default. And again, select that reference node, the top reference node, and then you want to move that and line it up. Basically just try to, it's not going to be exactly, so you can't just, because depending on how you were standing when you was recording this in Brekel, the position of the trackers may be in a different place altogether. Maybe Brekel could put in a feature where exported animations can start at the 0 location within a grid. But basically just try to align the trackers as best as you can to your skeleton. Again, do not move the trackers to match up the skeleton. Just get the top reference node and just line it up. I usually like to line up the spine and the hip with my template. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. We're going to fix that later. And then just kind of go to the side and then kind of bring it out. So I figured once it's in the front, once it's lined up in the front view, the Z-axis is more of an aesthetic composition. Like it doesn't hurt or help if the controller is behind or in front of the character. It's more of a user preference, basically, because this is such a flat figure, and I myself is not as thin as this stick figure here. So once we have it lined up there, just go into the top view and just kind of align the controllers. Well, make sure it doesn't move any other body parts, and just align the hands with the trackers as best as you can. Basically in the same position like you were holding it in real life. So this is where a good reference image would come in handy of you actually holding the controllers, so you can know where your hands were when you first started. Try not to move the rest of the skeleton out of, from its default position. And then line the feet up with the trackers. So this is basically how you were standing. Well, basically this is how I was standing when I started recording. I wasn't in a perfect T-pose as when you create a character in Maya or the basic skeleton. So you kind of have a little asymmetrical T-pose going on here. Just make sure the trackers are in front of the feet and make sure my legs are straight. If you want, you can put a little bit of a bend in the arms, a little bit, just to kind of help with the flipping of the elbow joints, because I don't have any trackers there. And as far as the chest and the hip trackers, those are fine. The head controller, as long as it's within the top of that, this should be good. And there you go. So now, how do we get the animations from the controllers to the skeleton? At this point, we're just going to go to rigging or animation and just use a parent constraint. So open up your reference node for your ACC Vive and just select each controller and the corresponding controller within your template rig. Make sure this is in the full body mode and not the body parts. And then constraints, parent constraints, options. We're going to maintain the offset between the controllers in your control rig. And we're going to constrain every axis, all the X, Y, and Z of the translation and rotation, and click add. And then you're just basically going to go down the list, constraint, parent constraint, and just continue this for the rest of the rig. So now everything is connected. You can just click play and watch your animation. Wait a minute, something's not right. Okay, just go back. So the other trick to getting the controllers to follow the trackers is within the HIK rig itself. You have to tell the skeleton to follow the trackers, basically. So in the IK blend, just turn up the IK translate and the IK rotate for each point that's connected to a control rig. So you see the feet and the hips by default are already following the IK blend. So you just have to do the same thing for the hands and the head and hip. So the thing about the head and the chest tracker, we don't really need translation from these two controllers. So basically, based on how your spine is, the only thing we really need is the rotation for these two controllers. So basically, just turn on the IK blend rotate. And so with the IK blend translate set to 0, it will ignore all translations that comes from the HTC Vive and only take in the rotation. The IK pull is, I don't really think it's necessary to use the IK pull. That's another user preference kind of thing. So basically what that does is, like, when the character overextends, the HIK rig would compensate for that if it overextends too much. But since we're using trackers, and the trackers are positioned based off your body proportions, we don't need the IK pull. So again, for the head and spine, only thing you need is the rotation. For the hands, feet, and hip, you will need the IK translate and rotate. if you decide to get extra trackers for your knees and your elbows, you won't need rotation values for those. You basically just need translation to use as a pole vector for the positions of where your knees and elbows should be. So once that is set up, then you can click play and your animation should be on your skeleton. And it should follow your trackers pretty good. As you can see in the knees and the elbows, the position may not be exact. So if you have a good reference video of your recording, you can offset the elbow and knees to correct positions. If you have extra controls to go on your knees and elbows, then you can hook those up to your HIK rig as well. The same principle will work with Advanced Skeleton. I don't use Advanced Skeleton's skeleton rig. I only use it for the facial rig. So I really can't give you advice on how to hook it up to the Advanced Skeleton rig. But if it's anything like Maya's rig, and as far as the principles of following controllers, then it should pretty much work the same. So just go back to the beginning animation, and basically now we just have to bake the animation onto the control rig. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and import my character, just so I can show you a few things about the translation and the rotation. So this is my character Ren. And basically, Ren is already defined in the HIK with a HIK skeleton. So basically, just as far as the character, select your custom character, and then you want the source to be your template, and it'll snap there, and then your character should be following the HTC Vive as well. We can hide the HIK, the HTC Vive, and the skeleton from your template. So all the body penetration is basically because this character is much bigger than I am. So his arms are going into his chest when he brings it up close. So we can just do an offset animation for that. As you can see, it does the hand animate, as far as the rotation of the wrist and the feet are pretty good. It has good foot placement. I'll fix the ground detection in a minute. That's pretty easy. You see there's a little popping here and there within the animation, but that's easily, you can easily clean that up within Maya, or you can import it into Motion Builder and smooth out those spikes in the animation, or you can take it within any other animation software to clean that out. So one thing I want to show you is go back to the skeleton template of yourself, and as far as the head, let me get a good position of a head turn. So this is a good spot here. So you see it's only taking into account the rotation of the HTC Vive. If you want to put in the translation as well, you see it kind of moves the head a little bit, basically to try to match the hip, the entire position of the Vive, which is to me unnecessary. I don't really like that little. I'm not really a fan of that. So again, that's user preference as well. If you want that head, the full head tracking, I mean, it doesn't look completely bad, but You can see the head kind of dips down. It's not really that noticeable, but to me, I don't really use it. And for the chest, as you can see, like how his body just kind of shifted. So I usually, for the head and spine, I usually leave the translation off and only use the rotation. Let's go back to my character. And then you can just kind of go through and check the animations. Make sure everything looks good for you. See the foot rotations. See that, all that, you can try to get that fixed. That's easily fixable. Just take those pops out of those. And the head movement, pretty good. Jumping side to side. Now, this with the spine, the reason it's doing that, I kind of figure it's probably because of the hip controller. It's probably doing a lot of bouncing. So you have to make sure that your trackers are tight and not loose. You can see it's doing a lot of wiggling and bouncing back there, so that's why he's looking like that. So for future videos, I just make sure that the hip controller is on you tight. You can either use a belt clip. So in this animation, I was using a belt clip for that. For the most part, I usually use like a belt harness to put around my waist for that tracker, and it's usually more still than using that belt clip. So I'm not sure if I would use that belt clip for at least for the hip tracker in a way. Maybe I use it for a different tracker for something else. But basically that's where the popping in the hip is coming from. That belt clip is bouncing on my back, and that's why he looks like that. Let me try to find the walk cycle. Because a lot of people were asking about the walk cycle and saying how that would look. Not really sure what I was doing there. I have to check the video that I was doing. Not sure what that was. But again, there's little pops here and there. Just checking the controllers to see what the controllers were doing. Just a weird pop there for some reason. So there would be some cleanup that need to be done with the HTC Vive, just like with any other motion capture. But you could basically just go in and just delete those keyframes to get rid of that. Just be very mindful of the position of your trackers and how they're attached to you, and make sure they're tight and they're not bouncing around as you do animation. So investing in some good straps will be key for this. Yeah, the hip tracker is just bouncing around way too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and bake this to control rig now. and I'll be back once that's completed. Okay, the tracking has been completed. Everything has been moved to the character. So basically, just going to go through a few more steps to show some of the other tracking results, like offsets that can be done to that. See, I can find the part with the air guitar animation. Basketball. See, there was an issue with the foot tracker. It probably came loose. Sword animation. So to clean up as far as the position goes, you can always in Maya use the offset animation layers. Just find a spot where there's some tracking issues, like here. So let's trim down timeline to there. Just kind of go right before the issue and to right after the issue. Set a keyframe. Then go to the center of the issue, or where it's the worst, basically. Like here. And then you just select your two controllers for your hands. And just pull them out. And create a keyframe. And you could do the same thing with the elbows. First put a lock on those. And then for the elbows, just bring them down. Set a keyframe. I'm not going to really go into detail of the offset animation layers. There are plenty of other Maya tutorials that's probably way better than mine that can give you full details on how to use the animation layers. But then, as you can see, once I put that offset there, the skeleton is pretty good. Probably put another offset maybe around here because the elbows are too close into the body. So just kind of for his body in a way. They're probably fine for me, but for his body proportion, they need to be a little bit further out. Or if you just want to do a bigger offset, just for his hand there, just pull it out. Set a keyframe. Then you won't have to worry about that. So you see it's going farther past there, so just about where the animation should be good. Zero that out. Then you're good there. So I'm just going to go ahead and find another position where the animation was off. Like around here. So just kind of go before and after he does basically there with the arms. So I kind of do that for a lot. And then to right there. Set a 0 keyframe, then just go back to that previous keyframe. Yeah, wait till it gets into the chest and pull those out. And then pull the elbows down. Set a keyframe and then play back the animation. See, now the arm position is fixed. Well, right there, you probably want to create another keyframe. Pull that elbow out. So that's basically it on how to get animation from your HTC Vive into your character within Maya. So basically just do a bunch of offsets, animations to kind of clean it up. But I feel like you would do that with any motion capture. If you're using Brekel, iPodSoft, or some high-end animation, motion capture animation, there's going to be some offsets that needs to be done because you are not this character. Like, my body proportion is not this character. My elbows, because I'm not as big as him, when my elbows come to my sides, because he's so much bigger than me, it's going to penetrate his body. So there's going to be offsets that need to be done. As far as the floor detection, if you still have your HIK rig set up, you can just go into the attribute tabs and floor contacts and feet, and you can just turn that on. And they'll bring the feet up above the ground plane, and you'll have foot detection. And if you want, you can, it goes like that, skeleton again. And then you could just raise the floor, bottom to ankle, bump it up to 8. So you can bring it up above that floor plane, and you'll have floor detection. So overall, I like the HTC Vive setup more than iPodSoft, really. The tracking is more accurate, where you do have to be more mindful of the controllers and make sure they are tight on your body and they're not bouncing around all over the place. With iPodSoft, you have to, there's a lot of setup that you have to do. Like, there's a lot of setup with the HTC Vive, but with iPodSoft, if you're using the PlayStation 3 eye controllers, there's a lot of setup time. The setup time for using RGB cameras is far longer and far heavier than using the HTC Vive. Using the Kinects or any kind of depth sensor, you won't get as accurate as animation as you will with the HTC Vive, but the setup time may be faster and easier. You can use the PlayStation 3 One controllers to help with the hand and head tracking, but then you basically have to there's basically more parts that you have to find that's becoming obsolete and harder to buy. Overall, iPodSoft's prices have come down with the permanent license that they now offer. So the iPodSoft is becoming more of a viable option than using the HTC Vive. But even though the HTC Vive is more expensive, the animation is just much better. Far better. I mean, the cleanup is a lot better as well. If you know how to clean up animation. If you don't, then iPodSoft may be better for you because it has its own animation cleanup. So basically just pros and cons to everything as far as using the Vive, using Orion, and using iPodSoft. The next video I'm going to do is basically I'm going to bring in all of the animations that I've done with all of the softwares that I've presented. I'll bring in the skeleton for the Orion rig. I bring in the skeleton from iPasoft and I compare it to the skeleton from Brekel, and you can basically see the quality of the animations between all three of those softwares, and you can pretty much get a good idea of which one you may prefer. Again, thank you for watching my video. Like, subscribe, comment below, and you all have a good day and enjoy your animation adventures.